right, everybody, welcome. Hopefully, we're all geared up and ready to kick off for our next podcast. Today, we are excited to be talking about landscaping and not just landscaping from a lens of plantings, but really a holistic view of everything that can encompass facilities and things that we need to be thinking about during all the seasons. I'm Jeremiah Johnson. I'm from the Muskego Norway School District. Happy to be here today. And with me, as always, is Joe.
Good morning, and I'm excited to be here today, especially since we have a guest speaker with us. As soon as we started talking about this topic, I thought of Pete Bemis, kind of the resident expert here in La Crosse. He's worked at Western Technical College, and I know him best for the work that he did at UWL. If you look at their facilities, if you've been by their facilities, you know that they're top notch, and one of the reasons they're top notch is the standards that he put into place while he was there. And so I'd just like to introduce to you Pete Bemis.
Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to take your questions and share some of my thoughts and my experiences.
Before we get started, I had asked you because I seen your resume and it included a lot of NFL teams. So I thought, what better than could you share any stories or fun things in your world of professional sports?
Yeah, so when we were at UWL, we had the New Orleans Saints come up for summer camp. I think it was 7 years that we had them. And so then we wrote the NFL coaches and the NFL coaches' demands. So I was responsible as a landscape manager and landscape architect for the college for everything outside, and that included athletic fields. So we would have to lay out and paint 5 full football fields for them. We would repaint one field every day using only student help. Um, I didn't have a lot of conversations with the coaches. Usually had some go-between, but I had a number of conversations. And I can just tell you this, that if you've been sworn at by NFL coach, head coach, you will never be bothered again by anybody yelling at you. In fact, we had this one conversation. I remember this head coach using a number of adjectives to the point where in my head I'm thinking, that's so many adjectives. You need a noun in there somewhere.
Very nice. I know. Well, super excited to have you join us. You're going to help us understand a lot of the intricacies behind some of this, given your background. As we geared up for this, we were talking earlier about the school districts, like the outside of your school is really like the front yard. You know, you try to be proud of your house, and really no different in our schools. More people drive by than come inside. And there's a lot of parents that are shopping school districts, and it might be the first thing they're seeing as they're pulling up to a building is the outside of the building. And you had some interesting statistics from like the higher ed world.
Right. There are a lot of studies about what does a student factors decide to come to your school. And the number one factor was the appearance of the buildings and grounds. So that's your first reaction to your site. So if the appearance of the buildings and grounds doesn't have a good first reaction, then the decision is all uphill. Then you now have to overcome a negative first reaction. So that first impression is really very important in selecting a school. They've got same as you're buying a new house. Your first look at the house is very important. It sets the tone. You're impressed or not impressed, and from there you have more decisions to make.
And Jeremiah, I don't know if you're the same we are. That's one of our focuses. We're just beginning that. Over the years, with budget cuts and lack of staff, we've kind of let our front entrances go. And we've gradually done some things, but I think we're really prioritizing those uh, entrances here at La Crosse because we are competing for students just like everybody else is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking back probably a decade ago when summertime came, it was kind of like grounds, you did grass cutting and that was about it. And then around the second week of August, we would send a team to every school to do like a spruce up. Let's trim the hedges, let's clean everything up and make it look super nice. And we would actually do our mulch during the end of summer too. And since then, the dynamic has changed for maybe for the better. I don't know, but principals have seemed to really care about the appearance of the school. And maybe it's for that reason that we just talked about with parents driving by and everything. But we've gotten more requests to beautify the outsides of our buildings to the point where I'm like, wow, I don't know that we have the labor to support what we're asking for here. So it's just trying to find that balance of how do you take care of things without breaking the bank. I don't know about you, Joe, but I have like certain faux pas. And I mentioned as a buildings and grounds director, I feel like I see the outsides of the buildings more than I see the
Mhm.
insides. I'm driving past them all day long and driving into the sites. So there's things that like seem to bother me more than others, and my folks probably know that. But like when there's grass cutting that takes place and people don't blow the clippings off, or there's litter around the site, or there's like black moss growing on the side of the building that could be pressure washed off. I think these are all things that are like basic even before you're thinking about beautifying the site, just keeping things well maintained and not being an eyesore as you approach the site.
Yeah, I can remember one of my first jobs that I got was working at a mall. And back then, I'm disclosing my age a little bit, but back then malls were the place to be, right? And they all were immaculate. And one of the first things we did every morning was every staff member at the mall walked the parking lot and around and picked up garbage. And so one of the things we've done and we've asked at our high schools to do the exact same thing first thing in the morning because our facilities are used all the time. Walk the facilities, pick up garbage. Time well spent in doing that. I don't know what you did at the university.
Well, right. If I was walking or touring, I set the standard to pick up trash as I walked. Never, I would never walk past trash. And my boss would do the same. So we try to set the standard right there that it's not allowable to walk past trash. And it certainly is not allowable to mow it. Now you got 3,000 pieces to pick up. But yeah, we would have people scheduled to walk to campus and pick up the trash because there's nothing ruins a landscape faster than just the trash laying around.
And I do think there's been studies, at least in bathrooms, where if there's a piece of towel on the ground, students are more likely to litter more inside of a bathroom. And I'd like to think that carries outside. If it looks trashy, nobody's going to be trying to make efforts to keep things cleaner.
Yeah. And the other thing that you mentioned is you look at the grass clippings, really blowing grass into the track or blowing grass into those other athletic surfaces to just takes away from the appearance. And so it's those little things a lot of times that we do that make a difference.
And they have to be reinforced with your staff. And that's part of the training and reinforcing, that if same with vandalism, right? When there's vandalism, you want to get it controlled as quickly as possible because you don't want those people to feel successful. And you want them to know that it didn't really make any difference. All the time you spent on tipping over the trash, we clean it up immediately. So training the staff and getting after the easiest thing like litter is a good priority.
And as we move along, I forgot to mention in the beginning, please drop questions or comments into the chat as we go here. I think a main question probably on all of our minds as we're talking about beautification and keeping things looking great is how do you maintain staffing levels? I don't think someone once said they have like 30 people at AmFam Field taking care of that 1 acre. And here we have like 3 people taking care of 80 acres. So this is a screenshot from our high school. And so we have multiple playing fields that require specialty setups and care. We just got common green space. We have trimming, like everything under the sun in a complex like this with 3 people that often are doing maintenance or things at other schools to help out too. So it gets tight. Joe, do you have how many staff do you have
Yeah.
dedicated to your grounds?
Yeah, we have 127 acres and we have 4 grounds crew. And so we're kind of dealing with the exact same thing that you're dealing with. And so it's now the last couple of years, what we've been able to do is hire some summer help to help us in the summer, which is new. We haven't never done that before, but the last 3 years we've been able to do that. That's a huge help. At least lets us get caught up and ahead of the game a little bit. But we're way understaffed when it comes to the grounds.
I was telling Joe when I would hire staff, especially student staff in the summer, I'd take one of the best employees and then make them a lead for the next year. And I would say, Joe, you're going to be promoted to the lead. You're getting more money, and I'm going to hire a bunch of idiots for you to work with. And Joe would say, well, why are you doing that? I said, well, who are you bringing me? So the good ones bring in more good ones. So you know, always challenge the good ones, the leaders, to bring in better people.
Yeah. We were fortunate to have a student worker for better all of his high school and then all of his 4 years of college up in La Crosse too. But he was
Hmm.
on our grounds crew every summer. This is our first summer without him, and he became like one of us, and he can operate equipment and stuff. It's always important when you hire summer workers too to draw some lines in what they can and can't operate. So for us, it's ideal if we can get somebody that's 18 so they can operate equipment. Otherwise, it's more trimming and like cleanup stuff.
Yeah, one of the things we've done, and we haven't used students, but we've used teachers and TAs. And so we've been very fortunate. We've been able to do this last 3 summers with hiring all TAs who wanted summer work. And so that's been really helpful. And we've been even accommodated their schedule a little bit, working 4 10-hour days so they get 3 day weekends. And so we've been successful with that. And then you train them and they're old enough and mature enough and they can do some of those things.
Great. There were some data available nationally as far as like grounds go. There's actually like some really good reference guides for like, the 5 levels of grounds care. Like what level do you want? Are you talking golf course quality? Or are you talking like lacking any maintenance at all? There was some data that suggested one full-time grounds worker for every 15 acres maintained. I don't know a school district in maybe the country that has that. But one FTE for every 2 to 4 school sites, depending on the complexity. And I think the thing that makes it tough, as we talked about earlier, is the athletic field piece. Like if you're doing setups for softball, baseball, lining fields for soccer, doing aerating, all the things that we've covered in other webinars, it makes it difficult to do the above board things too.
Yeah, when you're talking about softball, we have 2 high schools, right? And so when you're talking about getting 4 softball fields ready in one day, there's not much more time to do a lot of other things in the, so those things are critical.
This is a sample of kind of how our grounds team tracks equipment maintenance. So this is just a good thing. We talked about it, I think, a little bit in our turf management, but making sure that you're taking the time on top of caring for things, caring for the equipment that is a large investment for your system. So our team does a great job of tracking everything that's done on each piece of equipment that we have, how often it's done, and just making sure that that's up upkept. Do you guys have a similar approach?
Yeah, we do, and it's really critical because again, because of budget cuts, our equipment has to last longer, right? So we don't have the money to replace it as often as we used to. Used to be on a 7 year cycle for replacing equipment. That's not the case anymore, and so our equipment has to last longer, and so maintaining that equipment and hiring people who will do that, treat it as if their own, is really important.
I think one of the probably most important person on my staff was our mechanic. Once we got a good one, it made all the difference in the world in that the equipment was ready when we wanted it to be ready. We're gonna need a tractor to pull an aerator. That tractor was always ready. And of course it was all his program was computerized so that he would stay ahead of it, knowing what the schedule was, and having access to the schedule, then he would then plan for the maintenance prior to the need.
Yeah, there's a lot of work order systems now where you can get preventative and create proactive. You could put all of these items into a system that will
Yeah.
remind you on a continual basis of things that need to get done. Jumping back, somebody asked a question. What type of training do you provide for your summer helpers? I guess specific to grounds work.
Well, one thing you have to do is make sure that you yourself are trained. Of course, there are many different organizations that help. For instance, Wisconsin Sports Turf Managers Association, to have one of your staff involved with that. Great place for resources and other people and education. Reading your periodicals, your magazines, if it's professional grounds maintenance or whatever resources you have available, and there are many of them. There are many training videos. I know the ISA International Society of Arboriculture at one time had a lot of good training videos, and those can be shown in that limited downtime in the winter. where maybe get a few hours to do some training, or to bring in someone with a greater knowledge of plant maintenance, like Joe was saying about pruning shrubs. Well, the first thing you do is don't plant shrubs that need pruning. We know exactly how big the shrubs are going to get. There's resources on that, and the nurseries have that information. So don't plant an 8-foot shrub when you have a 4-foot space. Plant a 3-foot shrub in a 4-foot space, and then you don't have all that pruning. So to get we call it RPRP, right plant in the right place, is critical.
Yeah, and for us for training, we limit what our summer staff does, so they're not using chainsaws, they're not cutting. So we do all of our trainings based on lawn mowing. And so we do that at the beginning of the summer when we get them on board, and basically that's the training they do. We do require all of our staff to be CPR certified, because they're out working and away. And so, but those are the trainings that we do.
I would add too, the training always starts with safety. If it's sunscreen, water, safety glasses, long pants when you're line trimming, etc. How to handle an emergency. Always start with the safety factors in the training.
Yeah, one of the things that I used to teach a class when I was going through college through the Red Cross, lawn mowing safety. And one of the things I think that people don't realize is that if you have a little piece of wire, for instance, on the ground and you mow over that, that shoots out at over 200 miles per hour. And so just knowing that animals and children are away from that mowing is really critical, part of that safety training that you do.
Great. Much like tracking your maintenance of equipment, it's helpful. Our team does a great job of tracking the things that are done throughout the district as far as like the time was spent on each field, which is really helpful too. When if you have an athletic director that thinks maybe a certain element isn't getting enough attention, to share the story of how much time you're spending on a specific field, whether it's setups or grass cutting or any special services that happen. We also keep track of the amount of hours that's there and the amount of hours available. So after we total out all of our projects for each month, so in July we're at 423 hours, and that's just the grounds upkeep, and we only have a total labor force of 495 hours. So like there's also other things that have to happen, such as litter and special projects and helping out with maintenance around the district. So it's just good to tell a story through the care for each field. And Pete, you were talking about how you guys track this too.
I found it to learn the hard way is that, and I have a schedule out for, say, turf grass management for your practice fields. But I have to get together with the person doing the scheduling of that facility and become their good friend. So this is when you bring the coffees and donuts to the meeting, to explain that you need the field at certain times. And I would say, well, we're going to do a deep time aeration that takes some hours, and I'm going to need that facility for a week. And they of course say, well, it doesn't take a week to do that. Well, how long does it take? I said, well, it takes, probably 8 hours. Well, I'll just give you 8 hours. They said, well, no, you can't do that, because if you can't tell me exactly what the weather's going to be on that day and the week before, it's not going to work. I got to have the whole week. I'll only need 8 hours, but I need the whole week to ensure I've got the weather picture to get it done. And so to get your schedule into the facility schedule very early, even years ahead, to lock it in was really very helpful to get them to understand that. Then I would have a schedule for athletic fields. I'd have a schedule for the campus turf grass management. I would have a schedule for, we had a greenhouse, how to run the greenhouse, a schedule for, what plants are going to be planted and when they're going to be planted. So, and then a master schedule for all those put together.
Awesome.
I just have one question, and we didn't really have this in the thing, but did you do your own screenings, and how did you select screenings for your softball and baseball fields?
You mean for the playing surface?
For the playing surface, yeah.
So luckily I have a long background in baseball and softball. And when I was at the University of Illinois, my master's thesis was prototype design of baseball fields. But then it also comes down to your local resources. So we developed locally here, we can have limestone, because we have limestone screenings, and then we would add granulated clay to it that you buy in 50-pound bags to get a good playing surface. Nowadays, you can actually order in playing surfaces from different companies. I know Wapaka Sand has different mixes for different playing surfaces. You have a different mix for the outfield warning track than you do on the infield. Uh, so there are recipes, and you can buy it direct that way. But it also becomes, what are your local resources? So we do have a lot of limestone in Wisconsin that is screened for instance, one that's well known to engineers is bike trail mix. So if you're on a state bike trail, there's a screening level for that. Well, that's too coarse for a baseball infield. You have to go finer than that. But then that'll be too loose. So then you have to buy the bags of clay and mix that in to the top couple inches. And then we would always have a pallet of the the clay, which is a drying agent also. So when you have a wet field, you put that down. So you're putting down something to dry out the field, but also enhancing the field. Way back when they might put down sawdust, which just made a mess, or something else that was inappropriate. So the products are easily available to have granulated clay to put in as a drying compound with your ball fields. We've used it actually on football field too. We had a football field that had ice footprints on it, and we had had to play another game. So we took the biggest truck and the plow and went backwards on the field to level out the footprints, and then we dragged it with a baseball drag, and then we put down the drying compound so that you'd have a little grip on the ice, and drag that in, and then we painted it, and they played a football game on it.
Well,
So as we think about landscaping, it's not just a summertime season thing. Oftentimes you got to start prepping even while you're in the midst of winter. And we went through a process with meteorologist Mark McGinnis that talked about where to keep your snow piles, which is something that we didn't give much thought to, but you want to start to think about where your snow thaws and, there's a potential if it's in a walkway that as it's thawing, it's going to cause ice. So that was really his angle. But even just thinking from a practical standpoint, wherever you're putting these big piles, likely there's going to be a mess underneath after it all melts. So thinking about, are you holding your contractor, if you have a plow contractor, to repairing any damages, or are you having your own crew go around and repair any damages that are made throughout the winter process? And I think that all starts even in fall when you're staking stuff out to mark off where grass is. Do you guys have good processes for this that you'd recommend?
Well, I'm sure that a lot of you have to put down some type of de-icer on sidewalks. And we would try a lot of them and found the more elements in the de-icer, the better it worked. I mean, they all work really well when it's 30 degrees, but trying to get something when it's 5 degrees. And of course, you put down that de-icer, the people moving around, it breaks up the ice and it gets plowed off to the side. So now you have a high salt content. That high salt content is going to kill the grass. The salt sucks the moisture out of the grass, kills the grass. So then you're not going to have the resources to strip it and resod it. So then we would go over it with a walk behind aerator, a couple of passes, and reseed with a bluegrass pruning ryegrass mix. That was our resolve. Patch what you can with the big pieces, but if you have a lot of de-icer down, you're going to have dead grass on the edges, and the only way then is to aerate it to get water, to get some of that salt to flush through the root system, and then to reseed timely. A lot of time on that one. That may have to be contracted out.
yeah, one of the things we've done, Jeremiah, is we have a map of all of our facilities, and we plan ahead where that snow is going to go. And so we share that with our contractor. We do part of our snow plowing ourselves, and then we have a contractor doing that. But we meet with them before the winter begins, and we lay all that out. And so it's in a map. It's very easy to read, see where they're going, so we can limit. It doesn't totally get rid of some of the damage that's done, but limit the damage to areas that aren't quite as noticeable.
So that also where as a landscape architect, where that skill comes in the planning of the site and addressing. For instance, I've seen sidewalks where they have hedges on both sides. Well, where are you going to put the snow? You're going to put it through or on the hedges and ruin all the hedges. Now you're adding more cost to it. So as Joe said, to plan ahead for that in the site design. And so that's something that you address with your landscape design.
All right, mulch. So there's a couple variations of this. There's like certified playground mix that often we're putting in on a regular basis, and maybe we can talk about frequency there. And then there's the ornamental mulch that many of us have too. We used to have like the big pile that would show up, and it was a little bit cheaper, obviously, but then we'd have a summer crew or a custodian spending 2, 3 days shoveling it into the spaces. And we found a contractor, there's several of them that can do blow-in mulch. So they show up, they blow it all in. It is a premium, so I think you have to kind of add up and see what your budget will tolerate. But we've gone to a 3-year cycle where we'll do our elementary schools one year, the next year we do our middle schools, and then the third year we do our high school, and we keep rotating that way. So we have an answer when the principals ask when they're going to get done. And playgrounds really is dependent if it's getting low, especially around swing sets where the kids just continue to drag it in and out. Any good strategies that you guys have?
Yeah, one of the things we've done exactly what you talked about. We do the blow-in mulch for our playgrounds, especially when we buy that, and we coordinate that with some of the other school districts in the area. And so when they're doing theirs, we kind of do that together. And so we get a little bit better pricing if you do that, and then we give them one area they can stage, and they can bring their trucks and go to the different districts, different schools, and do that. So blowing it in, especially in the playgrounds, has been really nice. We do that as needed. We evaluate that every year. We haven't done that with the mulch around our the other facilities, and so it's something that we should probably consider. Maybe you can tell us what you've done.
Well, of course, the mulches for playground is dramatically different than the mulch for plants. The mulch for playground is very specific to meet the safety standards. For example, the picture of the individual mulching the plantings, one is don't have that many beds. Maybe use a lot more trees, ornamental trees and other trees, and having fewer mulch beds. Like in that picture there, the plants are obviously pruned. Well, don't put plants that need to be pruned. Have the right plant in the right place. So then I don't need to prune it very often, if at all. And then the mulching, yeah, you got to do it every year or 2. 3 is probably stretching it, but I understand the resources. So again, from a landscape design standpoint, don't have very many of those beds. And if you do, make sure they're accessible for someone with a hose like that. Where are they going to park and where they can get there. Another comment is to have a variety of plantings to give you a variety of flowering. And I'm always saying, like this time of year, crocuses are going to come up first and give you a flower, then the tulips, and then the daffodils, and then you move into your perennials. And so there's a flowering sequence that we know what it is. And so you put in the planting so you have flowering sequence throughout the year. Also, you have color in the leaves of plants, and you can have color even in the stems of the plants. So you can add color to your facility through more careful plant selection.
Can you talk a little bit about mulch versus rock?
Right. So the rock, of course, stays there longer, but it doesn't always match up with the plantings you have. So for instance, along the sidewalk, I might have a planting as a daylilies. Why? Well, daylilies can stand a lot of abuse. You can put salt on them, you could put snow on them, and they just don't care. They'll just come right back. But if I want those plantings to expand and get bigger and bigger, I need to put the mulch around them so that they can grow. If you put the rocks around them, they're not going to grow. They're not going to get bigger. The daylilies or hostas, that type of planting, a perennial that will get bigger and fill in and be more and more impressive through the years, works with the mulch, not with the stone.
So did you use a combination at the university, or did you stick to just one or the other?
We pretty much just use mulch.
Okay.
The stone's expensive. There are some places where obviously you can use stone, but But the plantings and the stone don't really work well together.
Okay, thank you.
One strategy that we've done is we used to always do mulch right before school started, so it was like really beautiful, but before you knew it, it was fall and winter, and you kind of lose that pop. We started doing our mulch. We actually did ours this past week, so that we got more of like the spring, summer, and fall out of it. It stretches, I guess, the beauty of it a little bit longer. If you have anything left in your budget now, that's always a tough time to make that decision right now as we're reaching the end. But
Perfect. Yeah, I would say that's one of the keys for us too. We have at one of our high schools, we have a Memorial Day celebration, right? It's a 100-year celebration we've been doing, and we put that mulch down before that Memorial Day is kind of our goal. So kind of it's changed over the years, right? And so that's kind of where we've gone to.
I want to throw in your comment about the budget. Every district is different, but you have a fiscal year. So we would always have a set of specs out for equipment and bids received going into the last 3-4 weeks of the fiscal year, just in case there was a little money they wanted to move, right?
yeah.
So if I had the specs done and the bids in an envelope ready to hand in to the controller, we often would get equipment at the very end of the fiscal year because they had money they wanted to move, and I had the documents ready to help them spend it.
That's super wise. It's always nice when, say, a principal has a little bit of money that they want to contribute to a project, but it's like
Yep.
June 25th, and you know the project's not going to get done till after July 1st. So, agreed.
More than likely, that works in your district. In my district, what happens is they have a project and they'll pay for some of it, and then they'll find out they didn't have enough to finish it, and they need us to do that. That happened to you?
Oh yeah, yeah. We had a stair prep. This Pat. Now we're going on a rabbit chase here, but
Yep.
principal had money to replace stair treads. Well, they didn't get it in time, and they didn't have enough money, so I ended up doing both. But I had to like buy the treads and then sit on them for a year until we could afford to put them in. So yes.
Yep.
All right. Pictured here is this morning during sunrise. The bane of my existence is this red granite. This is our solution to the ice melt situation where around all of our sidewalks that we plow all winter long, it all dies. So then inevitably we put in this red granite, which is fine at our district office here, but at the schools it just gets kicked everywhere. And so we've even gone to the lengths of testing out like rock glue, where we would spray down this glue on top of it to see if we could get it to stay, and it didn't. So that was I wouldn't recommend that. Is there any other alternatives to this? And I've asked architects and everything. You see golf courses, they sometimes will have like concrete borders with field stone in it or different things. Or are we just living with you got to aerate and reseed every year?
Well, one option, of course, is expensive is to put in colorful pavers, to have a 2-foot border on each side of colorful pavers. So that just widens the sidewalk, and if people are cutting the corner, that'll address that. Now that is a long-term solution and rather pricing. So I'm sure you'd have to phase in and pick a couple of sites each year. And again, I would look at every entry. I was telling Joe my big line as a landscape architect is repetition of design elements provides continuity to the site. So you have to have repetition. So like in this site, maybe we're going to put in pavers and a bench. So that paver and that paver pattern would be repeated every facility. That bench, the color, the shape, the form would be repeated on every facility. So then when people come up to a building, they know it's a school district building simply because the repetition of design elements. Another one is perhaps there'd be a trademark plant you're going to put in a columnar planting. Well, use that again and again and again to repeat those design elements. Same with signage, right? Signage should always be the same design, and then the wording is changed, but it's the same design. So you have repetition of design elements to provide continuity to the site and throughout the district. So that little planter, if I'm going to have a planter, I'm going to have the same planter in every site. So then people start to recognize that, and those elements are repeated.
Well, you'd be happy to know we have 3 dead mums in front of our district office right now.
Hey, I
uh,
first of all, I want to thank Jeremiah for sharing pictures, right? Because I could have done the same thing and showed some areas where we're lacking. But it is a focus for us in the next few years is to address those front entryways and the continuity is what we talk about is branding our school district. And I think it's part of that branding process and that we're really starting to do that now and working deep into that, everything from signage to the things you've talked about. But I don't always think about it. I can tell you from buildings and grounds perspective, haven't always thought about that from a when it comes to landscaping. But I think there's some wonderful thoughts there.
And I missed the comment, but John Stangler noted when you're doing playground mulch to make sure that it's certified playground chips. Sometimes you could buy regular mulch and there'd be nails in it or other things. So it's good to make sure that you're using certified.
right. And the playgrounds need to be inspected on a regular basis. There are a lot of standards with playgrounds, and the playground companies who provide that equipment that they'll help give you guidance on how to inspect and what to inspect and when to inspect it and to document it in case there is an injury. You got to have documentation.
Yeah, we inspect our playgrounds monthly, that our building engineers have to fill out a sheet and do that. And it's a good way to do that to make sure you're raking that into areas that kind of get moved around the mulch area.
Similar. All right. We talked a little bit about this already, but best plantings. And I think it, if I were to guess, most of us have slim plantings, but maybe the wrong plantings in the wrong spots or whatever. But why don't you talk us through what we should be considering from a practical basis from your lens?
Well, I want to start with the conversation of native plantings, which are very popular. And native plantings are wonderful. Every plant in the right place is great. The trick is to get the right plant in the right place. So if they want a native prairie, well, prairies are large expanses. Thousands of acres are prairies. And it wasn't until the settlers came with a steel plow that they could plow through the prairies. Prior to that, they had wood plows and they found it easier to cut down the oak trees. So the prairies take years and years to develop. And you aren't going to have a prairie in a 20 by 30 plot. And with native plantings, to take every native plant you can find and put it in a place is not going to be attractive. It's just going to be a visual mess. So there are hundreds of plants that were developed specifically for our zone, for their color, for their height, for their width, for their other characteristics. For instance, in the sign there with McKay, very good company. So they really have 2 plantings there, that purple flowering, they're massive plantings, and then the evergreen behind it, another massive plantings. They don't have 15 different plants. They have 2. So you have to have large groupings of plants to have visual impact. The larger the building, the larger the groupings of plantings. But again, repetition. So if I have this sign on every building, that's my design of my sign, I'm going to have similar plantings. Maybe not exactly the same, but similar plantings. But there it's 2. One of the things also about mass plantings of, say, flowers, it's easy to maintain. You just go in and say, what doesn't match, right? I've got 500 of this yellow marigold. Well, if it's not a yellow marigold, out it comes. So by mass plantings, it's actually easier to maintain. And then, of course, to pick plants the appropriate sizes, so I don't have to do much pruning. I certainly don't want to have hedges. Now, the plant in the right, we do have a hedge there those are Thuja occidentalis, otherwise known as arborvitae, and there's a repetition there. They form a nice border because you have enough of one plant to have a visual impact. So simplify the plantings to have more of 1 or 2 types of plants. The native plantings, again, if they're by height shortest in the front, taller in the back, can work. But people go to the nursery and they grab one of this and one of that, and pretty soon they got 12 different plants, and they're putting them all together, and there's no form or function to it. It's just random. Even in the prairie, they don't have that much random. If you take a prairie plantings, there's a dozen different plants in there, but it's really, really difficult to find someone who knows all the plants in the prairie and what all the weeds are in the prairie, and to be able to tell the difference. So I'm not saying prairie plants aren't, or native plants aren't worthy. They are worthy, but to try to duplicate a prairie is extremely difficult. And I think you're better off to use the plants in a more traditional format. Like rather than prairie grasses, there are some great ornamental grasses out that really give you great form and function and color year round. Some people like to cut the grasses down in the fall, which I disagree with because they still have winter interest. If you want to cut them down, and you don't have to cut them down, you could just cut them down in the spring. So then they're going to come back up new from the base. But you don't have to cut down the ornamental grasses. They'll live just fine on their own and come back. So to look at ornamental grasses, which are visually stronger and have easier maintenance, prairie plantings are very difficult to maintain, and really they can get very messy. We have a planting like that at our local YMCA, and I think it's just a big mess, and they have trouble maintaining it because people don't know what the plants are.
Let me ask you this question. So what would you recommend for a school district? So limited resources, those things out there, hiring a landscape architect, doing the work themselves. Is it hard if you hired a landscape architect to do a design? Is it something, do you feel like that our staff would be able to implement?
Well, landscape architecture, of course, do include plant identification, but not every landscape architect is good with plant identification and plant use. It's rather tricky one to find the right person. You might be better off to go to a McKay nursery or your local nursery. Hopefully there's someone who has more information, but we know what all the plants will do. There's plenty of resources. One of my favorite resources is the author is Michael Durr, Woody Landscapes. It's a thick book of a Bible of all the woody plants, shrubs and trees, tells you exactly their landscape use, exactly how big they're going to get, and how to use them in the landscape, sun or shade. So we have all the information in the plants. It's the idea of getting the right plant in the right place. And for school districts, keep it simple. 2 plants, 3 plants in a space, one for color, maybe one for fall color, one for winter color, and to have more plantings of simpler plants will give a stronger visual impact.
Okay, thank you.
And I would encourage everybody to do their homework. We had a local Rotary Club come forward and say that they wanted to turn a space that it really is just unused space into native prairie grass. And so I thought it was kind of a cool idea. The superintendent did too. We bought into it, only to find that you have to do like controlled burns. You have to do some weed mitigation in specific ways. And that prairie grass is not cheap. It was like a little sack like this big, and it was like $1,000, I think. So there's definitely a price to be paid for having native stuff. And sometimes, like you had mentioned, you don't even notice that it's like intentional. It almost looks like weeds. So
Right. So I had one where at a facility I know they had a rain garden put in, the retention, and they planted, and the designer had 6 different plants. He planted them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through the whole site. And a year later, it had to be weeded. Well, to find someone who knows all the plants that are supposed to be there, identify them, and to know what are the weeds and what are the differences, it was just a mess. And likewise, in another planting I know where the individual had one planting for a large area, and then another planting for a large area, and a third planting for a large area. And there was very easy to determine the weeds. Whatever didn't match, pull out. And that planting turned out to be really gorgeous and well maintained and looked great.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
John mentions follow your local municipal ordinances, a minimum 10% green space for any remodeled or new parking lot areas. Yeah, sometimes our biggest enemy is our local city, where they will enforce you need to have this many trees. You know that you're going to put a tree in an island and that tree is going to be dead in a couple of years. So working together with a good architect to help select and follow your
And we could do a
ordinances.
whole session on tree selection and tree planting, which is usually pretty poorly accomplished. I mean, I've talked to cities like along sidewalks. They give you a 3 by 3 foot space for the tree,
Mhm.
and they say we don't like planting trees because they don't live. Well, if I put you in a 3 by 3 foot space, Joe, you wouldn't live very well either. Right. So if you look out in nature, that tree will have thousands of square feet around it, and it'll be gorgeous. But now you're going to put in a 3 by 3 space, and you think it's going to live, and you're going to fill it with a bunch of junk. So give it a bigger growing space. There's a soil called Cornell University designed a planting mix for trees. So again, another prescription that you could get. But essentially, if you have a really small space and you're not getting any water, yeah, the tree's not going to grow. So either give it enough space and give it the proper growing media, or don't put it in.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about trimming hedges. If you have certain ones, I'm curious myself because I had a plant at a house that I used to have and I trimmed it and it died. So tell us how we should be trimming or things to consider.
Yeah, well, of course, sometimes I'll get a call like, my plant died. Why did it die? I don't know. Why'd the fish die? Why'd the goldfish? Why did the cat die? I don't know always why they die. But with the pruning, like if you have a hedge, most people prune the hedge wrong. The hedge should be narrow at the top and wider on the bottom. If it's straight up, the top will shade the bottom, and then you'll end up with that shape. It doesn't look good because there's no foliage on the bottom half. If you have hedges, there should be pruned like that. The Minnesota Arboretum has some great examples of that, and that's how they should be pruned. But more often, I want to put the right size plant in to start with, so I don't need to prune it. And then another one is to go to a space and say, I know a space on campus where they have some large forsythia plants. Well, that's a beautiful yellow flower, but they over prune them every year, so you don't get very many yellow flowers. And I would stand there and say, is there any room above? Yeah, there's no wires or anything. Is there room to the right, room to the left? Yeah, then why are you pruning it? Just let it grow, let it fill the space. Like in the picture there, you had the automatic pruners. First thing I'm going to do is hide those babies because people want to just run those and they over prune, which makes all kind of other problems. So again, how much space is there, and get a plant that fits that space, which we know what they are, and then you consider, height and width and how aggressively is it going to grow. Like if you have an area you really want the plant to overtake it, and 3 feet high, I'll grow low sumac. That roots wherever it touches and it'll take over a hillside. So we know all about the plants. We just have to take that information into the selection of the plants.
A little bit about herbicide, and before we do, just a little disclaimer for those of us that are spraying herbicides around, whether it's a weed and feed or just any type of thing, we're supposed to be certified. I know my guys are going through recertification right now, and it's actually a pretty daunting test.
Yeah.
I took it many years ago. It was difficult then. I think I passed with like a 78 or something. But you do book work, or you can go to a class and then take the test afterwards. Um, but it's important that we maintain certifications throughout our systems.
So we made a big mistake here when we labeled pesticide. So the term pesticide includes, that's an umbrella term that includes insecticides, herbicides, all kind of products. But because they're labeled pests, people react to that strongly. If we would have labeled it plant health products, it would have been well accepted. Like if you have fungus in your toes, you put a fungicide on. Well, that same product can be used on plants. So it's not good to use them on plant, but you can use them on your toes. So there's a lot of misinformation with that requires you to then do a lot of education with that. So you have to have a pesticide applicators, but the pest typically is weeds. So it's a broadleaf weed control. And if it was labeled broadleaf weed control, people wouldn't have such reaction to it. But you've got to follow all the rules, and you've got to have all the signage, and you better educate the coaches, because the coaches are notorious for ignoring all the signs, unlocking all the gates, and bringing their people in, despite everything you've done to label it and do it properly. But it's a real misnomer to use the term pesticide when it's a herbicide you're applying. And of course, all the rules are meant for safety. The safety for the participants, safety for the applicants, and safety for the general public.
Yeah, your point is really good because we've had a group that's taken upon, and one of the reasons why we really stopped treating our lawns, and we're getting back into that now, is they said it's unsafe for our kids, it's unsafe, and really isn't. And but that's the public perception at times.
So yeah, there's a lot of education before you start. We would get phone calls to the chancellor about what are we spraying in those big white tanks, and then they would call me and I'd say, well, we call that water, and we're putting that on the flowers. But we would get calls as soon as they see the tank out, they'd call. Yeah, we are spraying. Yeah, what are we spraying? With water.
Nice. Can I ask Joe, we used to be pretty aggressive. We'd do 5 applications a year with an external contractor, like a weed and feed, and kind of like you do at your home lawn. It became cost prohibitive, like really expensive. So now we're just doing a spring weed and feed, usually around early May of the district. By then, we already have dandelions popping open, and we just need time to kill them down for that application to work. What do you guys do?
Yeah, well, I can tell you right up front, we're changing it right now as we speak. And so we haven't done a very good job of that. And so we focused only on athletic fields and we kind of let the front entrances, everything go away, kind of by the discussion we just had. So what we've done is identified our front entrances and our athletic fields, and that's where we focus. We don't do everywhere. And we're starting that this year, that process. And so we want to get rid of those dandelions in the front of our buildings. As people drive by. And so that's been our focus, knowing we can't do everywhere. Athletic fields, number one priority. Our front entrances are the second priority.
So with that's turf grass management. For one point is the University of Wisconsin Extension in Madison has is a tremendous resource for anything with turf grass. Dr. Doug Soldad and some other staff down there are just some of the best in the country and are a great resource. But with the weed control, you either have pre-emergent or post-emergent. Pre-emergent is really applied at this time of the year to stop crabgrass. Crabgrass, once it's up, you got a real problem with it. So you try to stop it. So that's a pre-emergent applied. There are no products available now that will work well if it's very young. Otherwise, you have post-emergence application, and that's your broadleaf weed control. And so that you can't spray until the weeds are up. And of course, then you get the dandelions and you're just doing weed control. But those products there's some really efficient products that you just spray once, you can just spray once a year. So if you do the broadleaf control once a year and you do a fertilizer twice a year, again, so many different products out there to talk to your products. Some fertilizers like you buy at the box store, that'll be good for about 5 days. But there are other products out there that will be good for 8 weeks, 12 weeks, or even longer. So you can have fewer applications with the right product selection.
Burning through some other stuff, just exterior items I was thinking about this morning as we prepped is like bollards can sometimes get ugly. They now make covers that you can slide over them. Sometimes it's parking lot light bases, whether it's painting them if your city allows or just helping them blend in with the school as well. Nothing brings more attention. You think about academics being the main thing our school should be focused on, but have some potholes around your parking lots and watch the community come forward in an uproar. So making sure you're cold patching or filling cracks or trying to be preventative with some of these areas. I did hear an insurance person once say, if you got a lip in your sidewalk and you paint it yellow to call it out to make sure people don't trip on it, you can actually get sued for that because you're essentially acknowledging that, hey, I knew that existed already and there was a trip hazard there and I just called it out. So things like this, I think, can go a long way too.
Yeah. Yeah. And potholes is perfect time of year, right? Again, our budgets are tight, but we're going through the parking lots and we're doing those now. And if you know, we use Matthew for the big stuff, and we do the small patches. The asphalt plants are up and running, so you can get to that now.
Um, Not a huge focal point, but signage I think is a big thing too now when we talk about branding and making sure there's something similar, a similar theme with landscaping. A lot of our schools have gone to having banners. I think they're great, but they also blow away, they fade, they rip. So making sure you have staff that can tend to them because there's nothing worse than pulling up to your school and there's three banners flopping in the wind because it was high winds over the weekend. We've tried to go away from the vinyl banners and go more towards the cloth. They seem to stand up to the wind a little bit more, but we still lose them like crazy. So they're great until they're not.
Yeah.
And the same thing with your marquees. Digital marquees are great, but sometimes those panels that show the LED lights, those we have a sign right now we can't get a replacement part for. So now we're gonna end up coughing up 20 grand for a new panel.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing with our digital signage. In fact, when you said $20,000, I'd welcome that. I think the price we got is like 49,000 to fix the one at Logan High School.
Ouch.
Yeah, and then when you look at those banners, we told Logan High School, I shouldn't name the school, but we told them, don't do red because it looks like pink in a few years. And guess what? They have some things hanging up that look like pink now. And so color selection, material selection, all those things are really important.
Yeah, I'm almost thinking going to metal banners up on there. I don't know if that would turn into a sale and rip the pole out, but we just lose so many of the fabric ones. It's
Yeah.
crazy. A little out of order, but this goes to your point, Pete, about the right time, the right application, just making sure that you got a map and a document as far as like what you're doing where for each of your fields. Tree trimming. We're down to 3 minutes. Any tips on tree trimming?
Rule number one, never take more than 25% of the tree, right? Uh, Let me back up. That's rule number two. Rule number one is to never buy park grade trees. Park grade trees are inferior trees that will never recover. They're structurally incorrect. They shouldn't be selling them. Don't buy them. With most shade trees, you want to have that strong central leader, and you always want that to be readily identified. So the second branch below the central leader is easily recognized as far below that, because that's what's going to give you the tree. So quality of tree selection. Two, never prune more than 25%. Three, prune dead and damaged material. Okay. Then for visual balance.
Let me ask you a park grade tree. Explain that a little bit.
Well, a park grade tree is something that doesn't meet the horticultural standards. There are horticultural standards that every nursery has to adhere to. And if it doesn't adhere to it, they'll call it out and say it's a park grade, and that'll be a discount. So that is a tree that's screwed up, is never going to get right, and you're going to spend more money down the road trying to get it to be right. So the quality it's got to adhere to the horticultural standards. And the better nurseries have that, but everything should be inspected before it comes off the truck. Once it comes off the truck, then you got a problem. So it's got to be inspected before it comes off the truck. If you're buying a ball and burlap tree, that ball should be very firm, very tight. If it's loose, leave it on the truck. And then the planting standards are important. This is a good picture. Shows the flare of the tree. On the bottom, you should see the flare, and it doesn't have any mulch on the trunk. So that's what this is a pretty good graphic to use.
What about timing? Is this the right time to be doing it when stuff is about to start budding, or is it fall, or does it really matter?
Yeah, and there's two times on when to prune. One is to look at the calendar perfectly and when to do it. The other one is to do it when you got the pruners in your hand and you got the time. So now oaks are a difference. They should only be pruned in the winter. But you could prune plants really anytime. Like now, if I prune a shrub right now, I'm probably going to cut off the flowers. So after flowering is really a good time to prune shrubs, is after they flower. But mostly the trees can be pruned anytime, with a few exceptions like the oaks.
Right. We will skip pond maintenance.
Is when you prune them and you have the sap run down the tree, It doesn't bleed. People, oh, the tree's bleeding. Tree doesn't have any blood. It can't bleed. There's no, it's just sap. It's not going to hurt anything.
Yeah. Well, I just want to wrap up by saying this has been fascinating. We've gone deep, deep into landscaping, and so this has been great. I hope the people that tuned in get something from it, and it's been great to see after these that there's a lot of views afterwards. But I think this is an opportunity that gives us to go deep into topics. So thank you so much for being here with us. A few other upcoming opportunities, WASBO University. So if anybody would like to take part in partnership with UW Green Bay, there's facility classes for budgeting and others that equally go as deep into many sessions that maybe you can't get at a conference where we're speeding through a lot of these topics. Our next topic when we get back together is going to be lead in schools. So we'll be probably joined by somebody that can help us dive deep into this as well. It's been a hot topic and something that will drain your budget and public perception rapidly. So with that, I just want to say thanks, Pete, for joining us. Joe, thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Right on. Yep, we'll see you at the next one.
Yep. Bye-bye.